so much for joining me today on Dying to Live.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you. It's an honor.
Oh, it's so nice to be reconnected with you. We've known each other or about each other for, gosh, a long time now. And I've followed along with your journey and all of your different career machinations. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today about all the things that you've been up to and kind of life in general.
Journey is definitely the right word because I always grew up thinking it was a destination, but it's far from that. So it's a road that we're all on together, right? I guess, but we all fail ultimately. So let's just have fun along the way. So,
Yeah, if it's not fun, then why do it?
yeah. I saw a quote the other day that everybody fails at life. You just might die sooner than others. So, I think how we look at our careers is similar to that.
Where do you think that comes from? The propensity to think that we're not allowed to fail and that failing isn't actually a part of growth and becoming, an evolved human.
Yeah. I mean, in business, there's books like Good to Great and things like that, but I really think great's the enemy of good. And I think so much in our culture, and I think watching my kids grow up right now with the spotlight of social media even makes it worse, that you have to have this perfect life. And I think people are scared to take that swing when it's not perfect. And the reality is that if it's perfect, you would, in my business, you would never ship a product, right? Because you're always moving along the way. And startup paralysis is a great thing. I remember just wanting to have the right idea before I launched. And the reality is a good idea is what puts you out there, and that's where you learn. So I would love to say that, whether it's how I am as a father or even in business, that I could do that. But it's scary being out there. It is really scary to put yourself out there and vulnerable and all of that. And I think it's easier just to hide in that comfort, I think, is where that place is. I don't know.
The paralysis of continually trying to make it perfect so you don't actually have to step out and be seen.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the quotes in the world, whether it's Jordan, the only failed shot is the one you don't take. Easy to say, really hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that have you always been of that mind, or did it take some practice to release, the perfectionism? Are you a recovering perfectionist?
I think, I didn't know I was a dyslexic till really late in life. And so um, I failed kindergarten. I'm proud to say that. Everybody says I shouldn't be talking about that. But yeah, I got kicked out of kindergarten. I just wasn't, quote unquote, ready. Um, and had the opportunity to get put in a school that was just thought a little bit differently, and to the point where they didn't focus at what I stunk at. They actually built around what I was good at. And I think that's just continually played out in my life, in that I don't see the world the same way I think other people do. And I think that's been taught to me to be an advantage. But I think in today's population, we take disabilities or anything that's negative and say that's a reason not to do it. I think I was raised in an atmosphere and educated in an atmosphere. It's a reason to do it. And so 1 out of 3 entrepreneurs are dyslexic. And I think it's just because we don't fit in the box, right? And I think also my parents had a big influence. They were not entrepreneurs early. My dad ultimately got there as his kind of third career, I guess. But yeah, I remember it was the entrepreneurial moment of all entrepreneurial moments. I was woke up and my mom's like, "Hey, the March of Dimes walkathon's coming down our street today. Like, there's 20,000 kids. What do you think they need?" I'm like, "Of course they need lemonade, right?" So it was like the best lemonade stand of all lemonade stands. And so I sold out in like a half an hour, and I ran inside the house. I was like, Mom, I sold out. I need you to go get me some more supplies. She's like, "You sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. There's money to be made." And I think I was 6 or 7 or something like that. And so she was kind enough and went and got it. And at the end of the day, I walked in the house. I was totally sunburned. And I remember I just had that entrepreneurial swagger, like when you have money in the pocket, and walked in and she's like, "How'd it go?" And I said, "Mom, I did really well." She's like, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah, I made $47 today." And I took all that wad of cash in the change and I threw it on the table. And she just sat there and she slid a piece of paper across the table. I said, "Mom, what's that?" She's like, "That's your invoice." I said, Invoice for what?" She's like, "For your cost of goods sold." and it was like $45. And so I had worked my butt off, and to her credit, she took the money. Like, she's like, all right, $45, that's what you owe me. And, I walked away with $2, and I was like, oh man. And it was such a hard lesson at that time. But, I think they were never pushing me to be an entrepreneur, but just taught me some stories along the way that helped populate who I am today. And that it's not how much money you make, it's how much you don't spend ultimately in business. So,
and how much you help people along the way, right?
That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, community's always been a part of everything that I've done, and that's just who I got brought up to be, right? You're only as big as the community you're a part of. So,
yeah, absolutely. Kudos to your parents for recognizing that traditional school wasn't going to work for you and that there was an alternative that might work better, and to make that shift for you. We've done that for my daughter a few times now, and
yeah.
she's just not made for regular public school. There's a different learning environment that's more appropriate and more appealing to her, that will learn or lead to a lifetime of learning, rather than just like sticking her in the system and trying to get her through it. And it comes from a privileged place of being able to do that for her, and I recognize that, and I'm grateful for it. But parents that are able to see that in their kids early, and foster a love of learning and growth and things like that, that's pretty amazing. I also had issues in kindergarten. I was sent home from school because I would not color in the lines, because I really didn't understand why they were lines, and why I had to color within them. And that pretty much sums me up. So,
it all starts there.
yes.
Yeah.
But that's actually why I wanted to talk to you today. Originally, so we've known each other for a long time. We met back in the day when you had ideated and birthed Teva Mountain Games, which, had a huge hand in elevating outdoor sports into the living room of America, a giant televised event that brought lots of things like paddling and bouldering, and made them, household words in a really fun, cool way. And have watched you shift your career in several different ways since then. But I'm also really obsessed with this idea of the life prescription, and how we live our adult lives based on the stories and the programming and the upbringing that we have, and the influence of parents and friends and community and where we live and all those things, and getting to that eventual place in adulthood where you're able to take a step back and say, oh, I didn't write this prescription for myself. Is this the life script that I want to live? Or is there a different way that I want to do it? I'm kind of obsessed with guiding people along those lines. And so I'm interested in the innovation and the entrepreneurial DNA that you have. Is that something that's written into your life script yourself? Is that something that was influenced by others? And we talked a little bit about it already, but tell me about this way of living and kind of where it's rooted.
That's such a great question, and probably deeper than I'm comfortable going a lot of the times, right? I mean, the world awards kind of surface level discussions. And, I think that's where a lot of this was rooted in, that whether it's the balance of masculine and feminine energy, and how that fits into what your role is in business, or even in life, in social circles, all the way to, am I a manager, an artist, or an entrepreneur? And like that classic Tony Robbins test, and I think others have talked about it, of, thinking I was an entrepreneur my whole life. And as I've come into my older adult life, if you will, realizing that I'm more of an artist, not in the pen to paper or, on a canvas, but I do have an uncanny ability to see creative solutions with problems. And that could be as basic as, something at home, or, a new opportunity within adventure sports, and how that can culminate, into something like the mountain games. And so for me, it's just this prescription of success was dominated in achievement, right? And I remember going through a program at Wharton. It was just a week-long program, and I wish I could remember the guy's name. He was in the Army, and he created this matrix. And he said, okay, we're going to go a vertical and horizontal line, and I want you to put a horizontal line across the middle. That's going to be neutral. And please go back as far as you can remember into the youngest years you can and plot major events within your life that just stick out. And um, if they were bad, put them below the line in a relative sense of how far below the line, or if they were great, put it above the line. And I remember doing that. And I remember sitting back and looking at my plot, my life plot, if you will, and having the realization that happy is not the word, but I thrived at the bottom. And at places where you would think life was just on fire and just all roses, there was a sadness. And I remember, this is probably, gosh, 10 years ago, just really having a deep thought process on, okay, why do I thrive at the bottom and how is that playing out in my life? And this need to do continual startups, or this need that I wake up every day on front end innovation, like what's a new product, what's a new product, what's a new product. And it's really, in my opinion, kind of what I get the juice from at the bottom. Like, you have the opportunity to build, you have the opportunity to make mistakes with full permission, because you can screw up when things are bad. And I really struggled when things were good of holding on to that. So, I loved being the underdog. I got recruited to swim and play water polo in college, and I chose, the school that didn't have the great program. And some people would say, oh, you're just trying to be the big fish in a sea. But I think it was a little bit of maybe an excuse to not be great right out of the get-go, but also giving me permission to be creative in the solution rather than the Bill Belichick formula, So I don't know if that's my life prescription. I know that my parents were not heavy-handed and you had to do this, but I do know that my dad said, you're not average. Like, I'm like, a C is a C, Dad. That means I'm average. He's like, well, you're not average. Like, just don't accept that. And that is the one, like, this is the level. But, I think for me, even in, the years that I am now, that I have to be really careful about finding fuel in that crisis, because you can tend to start to seek it out. And I wouldn't say that I create crisis just for the sake of a crisis, but I definitely seek it out. I definitely find situations. People are always like, well, why are you in the middle of that? I'm like, I don't know. I just find myself here, whether that's a startup or tragedy. It's just a place I'm comfortable. And I'm really, really uncomfortable. When I was named president of Teva and sitting in a boardroom of a publicly traded company, I didn't feel like I was in my skin anymore. And I tried to be somebody else that I wasn't. And that's when you lose. I mean, you might not lose on paper, but you eventually lose in your soul, or you lose on paper. And unfortunately for me, it was very a public loss, even though I did, I think, some great things there. It didn't fit into, what the box was looking for, if you will. And being an entrepreneur allows me to be unaccountable, which is a bad part, but it also allows me the freedom to paint outside the lines, and it just feels comfortable. But I also know that doesn't serve me in certain relationships and at certain times. And I would guess I'm a hard person to work for because of that constant challenge of the norm. I look at people like, I'm not comparing myself to Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, but I also see that they create a little bit of chaos in their worlds, and that's what fuels their growth too. And so walking that fine line of the right and wrong side of that, because it can be a dark, slippery slope if you're creating chaos in all parts of your life.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of become an adrenaline junkie about it as well. It starts feeding something that might not be that healthy in all areas of your life, as you said. So do you see an effect of that, or that coming into play in your personal relationships and your world outside of work?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think, or I'd like to think I'm the friend when stuff hits the fan. Like, I'm a person you would call because I can help you get out. But I really struggle in that daily conversation a little bit, of just showing up with the daily empathy and just kind of being that consistent source. And that's why, being a father, like, I had all these images of what it would feel like and be like and all that. And I'm not that. And, I'm trying to come to terms with that, because I think I am a good dad. I'm just a different dad than, that consistent you know, think, I don't know how to put words into it. And obviously this is a journey and I'm struggling through it today. But yeah, I mean, I cherish the relationships, and I found that, um, I do better when I limit those rather than spreading myself thin. And the same thing in business is that I work on a 70-20-10 formula, and 70% I spend of my time and resources on the bread and butter of our business today, 20% on organic extension. So, what is our customer willing to take us to with them on that? And then finally, that 10%, which is true innovation. And how do you make sure you're different 10 years from now than you are today as a brand, but also as an individual? And I'm one of those people that wakes up in the 10. Like I would spend 100% of my day in that 10.
Hmm.
But if I don't do that, I don't create the consistency that my life needs or my business needs or that my relationships need. So um, it's really that 70-20-10 formula that I'm trying to emulate on a daily basis. I don't do a very good job. I tend to want to play in the 10 too much. So I have notes everywhere of like, you know, play in the core more than I do on the fringe. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what kind of tools you employ,
Mm.
because you are very mindful. Like, I love catching you kind of in this journey that you're in at this time when you're very mindful about the ways that you've been in life and how that may or may not be serving you and those around you. And you sound also like you've got a fair amount of discipline that you're employing around that. Even if it's with your business now, then I'm sure you're already thinking about how does that extend to life outside of business. But yeah, what kind of tools do you use to kind of keep yourself on track or in the place that you want to be while you're on this journey?
Yeah. I think the most dangerous thing is that I keep having new tools, and those new tools haven't been very productive because I think it's consistency that wins, yeah, on that side. And so some of the basics of just pencil and paper really have been. I would love to say there's this great app and all these kinds of things, but in that 70-20-10 structure, it really just, am I, here are the core things I have to get done today that are the most important, and a minimalistic approach to that seems to work the best. Like, here are the big rocks, and if I move these big rocks, 80% of my life is going to be better, you know. And
Mhm.
so those big rocks tend to fall in that core structure. And then, but I do want to reserve that innovation time. And really, well, it's 10%, it's really 1%. I found that I've always played with this theory of one love cent, right? Like, if I could dedicate 1% of my awake hours to a key relationship, or that relationship with my son. And I know it sounds so surface oriented, but really, like, if I can make a dream come true of somebody or something with just a small investment. So 1% of your wake hours, just a little over an hour and a half a week, right? um,
Mhm.
if I can make that happen, I think things will start to happen. I think depth will start to happen. So it's not truly a 1% investment, it's just a commitment in that 1%. That's the start of anything. It's like that first step in a run, right? If I can start that first step, I'm probably going to get through the entire run. And but it is that first step that's really hard. And I think if we think about what that 1% is in relationships or in business, for me, it was the first item to launch a business, not, oh my gosh, what does distribution look like, all that kind of stuff. But I think we overcomplicate things. I really do. And I think that's true in relationships and business, and in living and in dying. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And this is the second time in like 15 hours that I've had a conversation about, especially in this pandemic time, about really looking at our circles of people and removing those that are surface level, that don't add value in the way that we really want them to, so that we can focus more time on the people that really matter and the relationships that we want to foster. And so I don't think that part of it is surface at all. I think this time is giving us the chance to really look at our lives and say, what meaning are we creating here for ourselves? Because it's so easy when the world is just churning to get caught up in the day to day and the glorification of busy. And then we don't have to look at all of those things. And so it's really quite a brave thing to be sitting back now and looking at our relationships and the way that we spend our time, because we only have so much time here and we don't know what that's going to be. So why would we spend any time at all on the fluff, right?
sure. I think it's really well said. The gift of pause is probably the single greatest gift anyone could ever give to anyone else, whether that's the hip word of meditation or mindfulness right now. But, I think for me, reflecting back on chaos and crisis, it's unsustainable, right? Like I can't keep up that pace, but I think what I enjoy is that it does ebb and flow. And I enjoy the downtime. And my greatest ideas have all come in on a run or on a hike or things like that. And so it is that high intensity work and then allowing yourself to have that pause. And I think the gift of COVID is it's forced that, like, right or wrong, it has dramatically changed our cadence. And uh, I'm just really grateful. And uh, obviously I'm going to be joyful when all this goes back, but I really hope that normal does not come back, because I think it's this gift of pause that really allows us to kind of sit in our pain and sit in those places. So I had a really bad injury when I was 27 years old, and it put me face down in bed for 23 hours a day, and lost sight in my right eye. And um, I remember sitting, I was probably 2.5 weeks in, and my grandmother had passed away, and I wasn't able to be at the funeral. And I remember sitting, I had this little like massage table extension that went off a bed, and I just stared at the floor with my one good eye. And I was listening to my grandmother's funeral, and I just remember having this moment that either being really pissed off this happened or just being really grateful. And the saying, and we've all seen it a million times, of just, gifts are not always cleanly wrapped in
Right.
beautiful bows. And um, I think sitting inside pain is something we as a society try to avoid at all costs. And I really think pain's the greatest clarifier there is. And not that I want to create pain in anyone's world or chaos and things, but for me, that's where I find truth, I guess, and have found, the hard spaces in my life, going back to that plot. That's kind of where I found. So the work I'm doing now is, how do I create that in a positive way rather than having that negative event of pain, right? So
Mhm.
um yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want
And
to be a firefighter, but I want, I want the upside of that a little bit, so that there is some consistency and pain-free acceleration, I guess.
yeah, I mean, you talking about kind of pain as fuel um, definitely solidifies you as an artist. That's for sure. 'Cause, art doesn't come from the happy times. That is for sure.
That's so true. Where
I
do you sit in that? Like, where have places of pain in your life kind of just fueled growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think a lot about my divorce
Mm.
about 10 years ago, and the eventual reconstruction of a really great co-parenting relationship and friendship with my ex. And navigating that was definitely, probably the start of a big personal evolution for myself. And then
Mm.
there have been professional ones. I had my two step parents die within close time proximity
Mm.
of each other, and they were both very different experiences, but both very traumatic. And I was up close and personal to both of them, which led to my own realization about pain and our discomfort with sitting with pain, or discomfort in general, and especially death, and how when we avoid these topics, we have no idea what to do with them when they come, and they all eventually come.
Mm.
So there must be a better way to have conversations and to build a familiarity and even a comfort level with things like pain and death, and all of the little things that we go through in life that uh, end up shaping us and shaping our direction, that are hard in nature. And we can continue to resist against that, and certainly people do, and I have in the past, and I still do, as a life is a continual learning. But the more that we can just take that pause and sit with it a little bit, and see that stuff as our friend in some form or function, the more that we can use that fuel.
Such a good lesson, so hard to
Okay.
deliver on.
Yeah, no, it sounds so good, right, on this
Yeah.
podcast, but so hard to like enact as a human.
Yeah. I think it's so pertinent to your podcast, but I believe, and especially as we looked at, not to get political, but the change within the politics and how you leave something says more about your character than how you enter it or how you deliver within that. And I've had employees along the way, and you have the ones that give you notice and walk out the door, and then you have the ones that give you notice and deliver the road to the transition. And it's just, for me, if I could wish anything for my kids, would be, in any transition, I hope you leave something better than you found it. And I hope that's what I can deliver in this world, but I got a lot of work to do. So, as we all do, right?
Don't we all? Yeah, it's a constant learning. But I love what you said about transitions. And, as I started down the road to do some end of life doula work, I did a lot of research about the role of doulas going way back when we used to live in, nomadic communities and things like that. And the role, especially of women, in helping people transition throughout their lives, not just birth and death, but all of the transitions that we go to. And now we're just kind of left to our own devices. There's no training, there's no, emotional capacity nurturing for these things. And so we really are back to teaching ourselves and hopefully passing on lessons to our communities about how to do that. And I'm with you. It's one of the things that I hope, my daughter takes forward as well, is how she transitions between different life events and people, friendships, relationships, jobs, and hoping that that's as graceful as it can possibly be.
I think one of the most impactful statements I've ever heard. So I did some work with First Descents, which is a adventure camp for young adults with cancer, and had the opportunity to not only be involved on the board, but was camp director a number of times. And I remember sitting with, and I can't remember how old Buttons were. Everybody has nicknames, but Buttons. And just listening to her, she's just said, for the first time in a long time, you guys are treating me like I'm not broken. And I think that's one of the things that we see within death as well, is like, it's such an uncomfortable conversation that we try to just ignore. I think because we don't know how to do it, and same with, if you had a daughter that had cancer, like, it would be hard not to treat her like she was broken, because you don't want anything bad to happen. And the reality is that by kind of embracing it and just kind of hugging into it a little bit, and getting yourself on the fringe of that transition, really kind of frees you up to live, I guess, a little bit better. I don't know.
Yeah. I love that organization and how they promote that. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be dying every day that you are struggling with cancer. You can be living every day. And just the permission alone, because we're not given that in this culture, is such a beautiful thing. And I think you're right. The closer we are to that comfort level with death and all the little deaths that we live throughout our lives, the better that we live.
So maybe you can help me out here, because I was just in a conversation just an hour previous to this with a fellow CEO, and we were talking about in the role of CEO, or the role of father, or the role of, so much is changing that for me, I've gained awareness that I have a whole level of emotionality that I didn't think I had. So to our earlier question on what my prescription was, I thought emotions were bad, and especially in business, they were bad. And I've come to realize that's really where I can be in my sweet spot. But I really struggle with, as a male in this society and all of these things, where does that feminine energy, have a role in my life as a father, a CEO, a husband, as a friend? And how can I kind of embrace that without, I don't think it's black or white, right? So it's in the spectrum. I would love your thoughts on just how, I can lean into that without feeling uncontrollable. Because when I'm the guy that holds emotion, and then when it breaks, like, and I would just be so curious to hear through your experience of all the things you just talked about, but as people are dying and all the transitions that you've been a part of, like, how can you help people lean into that a little bit more?
Well, I'm not an expert in, the masculine and feminine. There are beautiful people that do amazing work, and actually I'm doing some of that myself because I grew up more in the masculine, and I've
Yeah.
really been embracing and getting more comfortable with my feminine as well, which
Yeah.
is really about receiving. So receiving is really a tough place and an uncomfortable place for me to be. I'm much more comfortable giving. So it's really that balance between the doing, the pushing, and the receiving, and the waiting, the sitting, the resting. And I think that's a balance that you have to find for yourself. But in the role of doula, it's funny because sometimes there's a doula joke that our job is to do nothing, because a lot of it is just holding space, which is, can be innately both masculine and feminine in the way that it's done. So gosh, it is a fine balance, especially when you've grown up one way and you're kind of trying to rewire yourself, and especially, within business. But for me, where I've had a lot of luck, especially in business, is stepping out of the masculine and really spending a lot more time holding space for the people that work for me, and just receiving all the things that they want to bring me, because I tend to look at the relationship, or did in the past, as, I'm the leader, so I'm pushing everything down and I'm bringing this to you, and that's really not a great way to lead. So I guess that's my long-winded journey to pass on to you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things I'm hearing from you is that it's an and, not an or,
Yeah.
whether from all sides of business, relationships, and that, I think society wants black or white. They want Democrat or Republican. People want to know where you stand because it makes you feel comfortable, and, embracing that masculine and feminine energy, and being comfortable with being a leader, and, feeling that
Yeah.
side. And so same thing's true, at home. So yeah, thank you. I
and
think
ebbing and flowing between,
Mhm.
changing your mind. What works one minute isn't going to work the next. So
Yeah.
that's also very much in the feminine, is right, flowing with whatever comes up in the moment, which can be a really beautiful thing in all aspects of life.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with the ambiguity of flowing in between two. Like that's hard for me. I got some work to do there for sure.
You're so aware, though. You'll get there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is our time today, but I could talk to you for hours. Thank you
It's
so
fun.
much for being here.
I'm honored. Thank you for giving me the space to share some stumbles along the way.
Yeah, you bet. I'd love to come back in the future and capture more of your journey and see how you're doing.
Yeah. Hopefully get ups and goes a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a fun ride, and I'm excited to see where the next journey is for all of us. Such a time of transition for all of us, and I hope our new normal has some pause in it. So
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
Tell people before we go where they can find you, or FluidStance, or wherever you would like
yeah,
to direct people.
yeah. So FluidStance is really my, I guess, microphone at this point. So I don't do a lot of solo projects outside of that. So when I share thoughts about fatherhood, I try to intermingle that into the brand and things like that. So following FluidStance is the best way. So that's our handle on most social mediums. Not quite on TikTok with our brand yet, or me personally, but yeah, just in some of the old school side. And then, I've really been leaning into LinkedIn a little bit more, just because I found the depth of conversation there, ironically, because it's the business side. The depth on LinkedIn has just been a little bit more holistic for me than kind of what I was doing on Instagram and Facebook. So
That's interesting. I tend to be very, very, very bad at LinkedIn, so maybe I'll look at
me,
that more.
me as well. It's just recently that, yeah, there's just some good stuff being shared there. I think just for those of us that, you know what, I think we all have different degrees of how we wake up, but I definitely wake up in a business mind a little bit more than anything else. So maybe that's just kind of where I feel comfortable, if you will. So
Well, we look forward
yeah,
to seeing you there. Thank you again.
yeah. Thanks again. My best to you.